Welcome to Students Over Systems, where we talk with the creators, advocates, and beneficiaries of education freedom. I'm your host, Jenny Gentles. On today's episode, we're going to talk about how parents can successfully navigate the school search process. For this important conversation, we're joined by Vice President of Public Awareness for the National School Choice Awareness Foundation, Shelby Doyle. Shelby's the organization's chief spokesperson and oversees the foundation's efforts to develop and promote school navigation resources for parents. Shelby was homeschooled while growing up in Nashville, Tennessee, where she currently resides with her family. Shelby, thank you so much for joining us on Students Over Systems.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with Jenny.
Yes, we have had conversation over at the Independent Women's Network in my Escaping Your Government Assigned Schools series, and I so appreciate those conversations. I thought it's time to bring the National School Choice Week and Awareness Foundation resources to Students Over Systems, so I'm so glad we're doing that today. Let's start with your story. What was homeschooling like for your family, for you and your siblings?
Well, the short answer is it was great. I loved it. So I am one of three. And to start with, my mom actually started a hybrid homeschooling co-op here in Nashville that's still in existence with a group of other moms. And that was a really great support for our family because my dad worked in the music business. We had sort of an interesting and very Nashville lifestyle, and it allowed us to have the flexibility to have quality time with him with his work schedule and also have the in-person support and structure of classes 2 days a week, which was really just perfect. I loved that, and I followed that format all the way through my K-12 schooling, but I'm the only one of my three siblings who persisted in that all the way to graduating high school. So my older sister ended up in a performing arts magnet school because she's a much better dancer than me and always will be. And then my younger sister ended up doing full-time in-person private school and online school by the time she graduated. So it's really kind of like a case study of school choice. I loved what I did, but we realized it didn't work quite as well for all three of us along the way because of our different talents and interests. And so that's really what got me interested in school choice in the first place.
Yeah, your career path makes a lot more sense knowing your personal story. So thanks for sharing that with us. You were homeschooled and you know a little bit about homeschooling due to your current professional endeavors. And you certainly know that homeschooling rates, we don't know exactly how many people are homeschooled, but there's some estimates that they've doubled since COVID era school closures chased a lot of people out of the public school system and into homeschooling. And so when we're talking about homeschooling, we're not talking about the abysmal Zoom butler experience that parents had during district remote learning. We're talking about families enjoying flexibility, one-on-one attention, ability to focus on educational content, having the time to carefully choose what they're going to use for curriculum and materials and resources. And so they're continuing to homeschool. You've encountered a lot of homeschooling parents and stories during your years with National School Choice Week. Do you have advice for these families who may be still a little new, but are really trying to figure out how to homeschool in a post-pandemic era?
Yeah, I think the number one piece of advice I would give folks, and that is echoed by people who are currently doing this in the day to day, is don't try to replicate the school or the system that you're leaving when you start homeschooling. People have a tendency to kind of try to fit their homeschooling plan into the model of a 9 to 3:30 school day that they maybe just left behind for their kid, and really take a step back and give yourself the permission to be truly flexible when you're thinking about every piece of your kid's school day. Don't feel like you have to keep the same schedule, keep the same blocks of instruction, keep the same length of a quote unquote class period. Be really open minded about what that would look like for your kid, because that's the whole reason you're homeschooling, right? But people feel like that they need permission from somebody to do that or to think that big picture about what they want to do different in some cases if they don't have a lot of homeschooling support or know a lot of other peer homeschoolers. So that's, I would say, the first and most important tip is just trust your gut and really feel free to experiment. That's the whole reason you're homeschooling in most cases.
Oh, I love that. And I certainly don't want homeschoolers to feel, or prospective homeschoolers to feel like they're alone out there. Homeschooling is not just mom, kids sitting around the dining room table all day long. There are so many support groups and co-ops and resources out there now. It's really exciting. Okay, so as you know, Shelby, I am a National School Choice Week super fan. Here I am with my National School Choice Week mug, which is almost always with me during my workday. Um, Tell us a little bit about the mission of National School Choice Week and then a newer organization, the National School Choice Week National School Choice Awareness Foundation?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, National School Choice Week has been around for a long time. The first week was celebrated in 2011. So, we're actually coming up on the 15th anniversary, which is wild. National School Choice Week is a week that's organized with the help of parents and schools all across the country. And what we do is inspire people to put it together and share the information about what people are planning. But what people plan is up to them. So, tens of thousands of schools across the country have open houses or in class activities that help families or students in the school understand what school choice is and why it's important. And then we also do big awareness raising events like school fairs or like celebrations at state capitals that really draw attention to the conversation around the school choice options families want in states. And then we work with parents individually by spreading the awareness through interviews, through social media advertising to get them thinking about school choice during January. So that's been going on for the better part of 15 years. And a couple years ago, we incorporated as a broader entity called the National School Choice Awareness Foundation because there's been a couple more things we've added to our portfolio of work. And those are year round parent support for navigating school choice options that they have. We do that through Navigate School Choice, which is our English language program. That's schoolchoiceweek.com, where we have state roadmaps for every state, answers to all the questions people ask us all the time, focuses on things like how special education might work if you do want to choose a private school, and other topics like that we know are top of mind for a lot of parents. And then we have a program in Spanish that does a lot of the same things called Conoce tus opciones escolares, which my colleague Crissia runs. And all that is housed under the umbrella of the National School Choice Awareness Foundation.
Okay, so some people might think National School Choice Week, you guys are just busy 1 week of the of the year. Tell us a little bit about these like flagship events that you're planning for the week that are happening at state capitals.
Yeah, so we do a couple of main types of flagship events. The two most common are these events at state capitals, which try to bring together multiple types of schools and the parents that want to be able to choose them. So maybe a charter school and a private school association will come together at their state capital and talk about why school choice matters in their state to the families who choose these types of schools. Or, for instance, online learning in Michigan this year, students from online school across the state joined at the state capitol to show their legislators what it looks like when they learn online and why that matters to families there. So it's really just bringing that home to state leaders and making a point that this matters to families who live here. And then increasingly, we do these citywide school fairs, which try to bring together every type of option under the sun in one place and get as many parents to be able to actually start the school choice process as possible in January. That's so timely. People ask me a lot why School Choice Week is at January because especially if you're in the planning mindset, coming out of the holiday craze of December and then having to get a lot done the first couple weeks of January is not everybody's favorite. But it matters for parents because we know that enrollment deadlines often fall in that winter or early spring for many schools in many states. Sometimes even before School Choice Week happens, there's an open enrollment deadline for families in places like Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. So it's a timely time of year. We try to draw attention to the issue.
Right. The other concern about January is that sometimes it's really cold. So when you're at these outside events, it's really great that you have these wonderful yellow National School Choice Week scarves because it can be quite cold. So when people do see those yellow scarves, know that that is associated with National School Choice Week. All right. So you have these big events, these school fairs. I highly encourage people to pay attention to whether or not those are happening. And at IWF, we'll try to make sure that we let people know that those are happening in your area. And and then these resources that you all, as part of the foundation and these efforts, have been expanding. I, as much as I'm a super fan, I was actually shocked to read that the English language resource program includes 140 unique guides and 51 videos, which can be found at, as you mentioned, schoolchoiceweek.com. What are the 140 guides?
Sure. Number one, no, I'm just teasing. We do state guides for all 50 states. And those state guides include every type of school choice. So that's open enrollment in traditional public schools, public charter schools, public magnet schools, private, online, home, and microschooling and non-traditional options. So we run the gamut of all of that in your state and what the particular policies are in your area, if we can get even more granular than that. So, and in addition to that, we also do a video explainer of all that information if you're more of an auditory or visual learner, not a reader. That is also available on our website. And then we do guides that round up how the landscape of open enrollment works in all 50 states, for instance, and kind of compare and contrast. In this state, there's great unrestricted open enrollment within the same district. However, transportation policy hasn't caught up to making that really accessible for families. Or this state has great open enrollment flexibility in or outside of the district. However, oftentimes families are charged tuition if they want to choose another public school than the one to which they're assigned. So getting a little bit more in the weeds on a particular type of school choice. And then we just do guides that people tell us they need. So whether that's working with the Indian Education Association to put together a guide to how school choice works for particularly Native families. We've done that. We've done, as I mentioned, a special education guide, how to continue your IEP or other education services in homeschooling or private school. We've also done guides to how to navigate the jargon around education. So we have a whole glossary on our site that tells you exactly what all these terms that you may surprisingly encounter mean. That I'll stop there, but those are the types of things that we do.
Okay, and the interactive state map, tell us a little bit about that because I do have to confess I am a regular in going to that.
Yeah, so this is really the place we suggest you start if you're a parent who's just thinking about school choice and you want to get the lay of the land, your land in particular, your state. If you go to schoolchoiceweek.com, you can hit state guides. That'll take you to an interactive map where you can choose your state, and that'll get you to your state's roadmap. That'll show you what you need to know for each type of school choice in your state. And if it's during January, you can also find all the events that are going on near you, where we bundle all that up, whether your governor has proclaimed it, whether things in your state are lighting up red and yellow to celebrate the week, what schools are having events or registered to celebrate near you. All that good stuff is all bundled together in January. But throughout the rest of the year, we just give you the information you need to know as you might be researching or exploring school choice.
Well, I, as a parent, am exploring school choice. Actually, the first conversation that we recorded, I don't know, 2 or so years ago, I was telling you that even though I'm a school choice policy person and I've been at this parenting thing for a long time, I actually was feeling a little overwhelmed by the process of finding a high school option for my older daughter. So now I'm in that process of finding a high school option for my younger daughter, who's very different. And it's daunting, or it can be daunting. And I'm saying that as like a school choice professional. So I think it's because you just think, I have to know all of the options and it's overwhelming and I have to know everything. But really, you just have to know the process and then start walking through it. So, what is the process? What should a parent like me do when we're realizing, okay, we're not doing the residentially assigned public school. I got to research and figure out the other options. Where do we start?
Yeah, so full credit on this goes to my boss, Andrew Campanella, who's come up with this 7-step process that just makes it a very linear thing that someone can start and hopefully finish, which is what we're all trying to do. So,
Mhm.
step one of this process is the one that I think it sounds so basic when I say it out loud, but it's actually something people forget a lot of the time. And that is defining your why and you're making like a real mission statement for this process. If you skip this step and you jump into Googling and talking to people, you will gather a ton of information and then you will get to information overload and need a quick way to get back to, wait, what was I trying to find out in the first place? And so we really recommend that you start, like, take stock of your family, your values, your kids' values and interests, and figure out what is really important for them, for you as a parent and for your student, so that when people say, oh well, this school has a fantastic arts program, you can come back and be like, that's wonderful, my student isn't interested in that and I don't need to factor that in, which is great news for me because there's already too much to factor in.
Right.
So we just encourage you to like write that down, as goofy as that is, because if it's in writing, it will be a fixed finite thing that you can compare and contrast information and decide what is and isn't going to be helpful to you in choosing. We do know, because we survey parents all the time, we ask them like, where do you get your information to use in this decision making process? So much of it comes from friends and family, which can be incredibly helpful, but at the same time can be a total red herring if that student is totally different than your kid. And
Mhm.
so that'll clarify a lot of the rest of the process. So that's a lot on step one. I'm not going to give you all 7 because you can find those on our website at schoolchoiceweek.com/tips. But the idea is that you create this North Star, you cast a wide net and get familiar with what the types of things you could choose between are. Then you use your criteria to narrow it down and you talk to those schools. We encourage, even though I know it is a logistical pain sometimes, truly doing an in person school tour, even if you think you've got a good handle on a place, walking in those doors is a big factor. Even if you have heard great things about it from other people, know people who go there, that like instinctual sense you get when you walk in that door really matters. We really encourage families to do that.
I just did that last week. I visited 2 schools that on paper, I'm like, "I don't know, seem pretty similar." And then, yeah, that instinct or gut check was like, absolutely no on one, and, oh my gosh, I'm more excited than I thought on the other.
Mhm. It's
So,
like going to see a house, right? Like, it could look beautiful online and have every single thing you told your realtor you want, and you step in the door and you're like, "I can't live here."
yeah. Yep. Yeah, so think about your values, what's important to you, go visit the schools, but go with questions, right? Like,
Mhm.
you all provide some suggestions of questions to ask. What are some examples of things that the parents should be inquiring about on the tour?
So the questions should, of course, be responsive to what matters most to you, but things that matter to a lot of parents are academic quality, safety, and how the school day is structured in terms of the flow and experience they're going to have with the adults in that room. So questions specifically that would relate to those things are, on one hand, how do you handle discipline? What's important to you about the classroom behavior of students? And if students are behaving outside those guidelines, what do you do about it? That's an important question for most parents. And then another question that a lot of people like the answer that they get to, 'cause it's helpful, is how will I know if my child is behind in a subject? And what types of steps do you usually encourage parents to take when you notice that happening? School that is going to really invest in your child will have a very clear answer to that because that will happen to any student at some point along their journey and know what they would do in that situation and be excited to partner with you in that and share that process with you. It may be something that's really niche to your family. Like, for instance, if you have a complicated family schedule, dual working household, you live kind of far away, and you need to figure out the schedule of where your child's going to be from the last class period to when they actually can be home, talking about exactly how, if that's aftercare program is new, if it is well staffed for the year, if that's something that is flexible on pickup or drop off time, like those kinds of logistical questions are totally fair to ask. I think people sometimes think they need to ask like very serious, high-minded questions about, what do you believe about Montessori education, which is a great question too, but it's also totally fair to factor in sometimes I'm going to be 5 minutes late. Will that be the end of the world? And how much do you charge per minute that I'm late picking up my kid? It's okay to ask that if you're concerned about it and if it's going to be a decision making factor for your family.
Good news parents, I've gone to a lot of different schools, or my daughters have, and I've never encountered that being charged for for being late thing. That sounds stressful. Um, all right, so there are these key questions. There are also like online reviews. There are numerous websites out there that you can put in your zip code, find the schools, check out the reviews. You will have a website where you can search by residence or by zip code. It doesn't have that review factor though, which I think is okay because I'm not really sure what to make of those online reviews. Is that something that you guys address at all?
Yeah. So I have two thoughts about that. One, I completely relate to the desire to have that information at your fingertips and use
Mhm.
it to make decisions. We are all so in the habit of doing that about so much of what we do. However, I think that information is only as valuable as it is well vetted. And there's a lot that goes into people reviewing anything, but particularly an education experience is a very hard thing to get a read on from another person's 30-sentence review. So if you go to a website that has more of this content, you'll see, written reviews, and then you'll also see like ratings on a few criteria that add up to a score in a lot of
Mhm.
cases. And bone to pick I have with some of those is in some cases when I've gone to look at these and compare and contrast with a school that I'm considering recommending to someone or thinking about even for like my friends and family who of course ask me this question, sometimes I'll look into that source data and see that there's more recent information available in that state about that school's performance that is even being factored into that school's review,
Mhm.
which I find frustrating and unhelpful. And you wouldn't know to look for that, right? Unless you happen to be someone who looks at that all the time. And so I think that can feel like a quick fix to the information that you deserve to have as a parent in choosing. but in some cases it can be unhelpful or even not up to date on what you actually need to know about that school. So we recommend looking at, the broad strokes of what you can find out about a school online, but in terms of like quality and in terms of how people feel about the school, I think there are better places to go than those websites to get that information.
That makes sense. All right, there's so many new options out there, Shelby, and your resources help parents understand what those are, how they're growing. And I mean options in the form of state-funded programs. We now have universal or near universal school choice in quite a few states. We also have education savings accounts, which are flexible spending accounts that are state funded in quite a few states. And then we have newer models like micro schools. We don't hear about learning pods as much, but we do hear about the growth of micro schools. When parents want to know more about these programs that can help them pay for education options, or they want to learn more about newer models, where on schoolchoice.com would they go for that information?
So on schoolchoiceweek.com, you would go to the ultimate guides section, which talks about each of those types of schools and gives you a definition, a little bit of a backstory on, especially on something like micro schools, how this came into existence, and then what it looks like on a state by state basis. That'll help you get kind of this like overarching definition in your mind to decide whether it's the type of school you would want to consider. But especially if you're kind of tracking what's happening like moment by moment or year over year in your state, there's a lot to keep track of. And I think it can be almost unhelpful if you're a parent trying to follow a bunch of people's Twitter or Facebook or Instagram posts about this. Like
Mhm.
lots of people are saying, like, oh, this happened with this bill. And if you're not a legislative watcher, you may not be the person who's staying on top of it from the moment it passes the House, then your state senate, then gets reconciled, then gets to the governor, then gets signed by the governor, and then it's going to effect next year. You probably don't need all those updates. But what you can do is look at year over year on our website. I'll just plug ours at schoolchoiceweek.com/trends. We talk about year over year what's been passed and what hasn't, and when it's going into effect. We try to be very specific about things also that are going to affect families. So there's lots of things that happen in state legislatures that matter, absolutely, like things that support charter school facility funding. Great news. But as a parent, it doesn't change your school choice options this fall. And so we try to cut through that and talk about what's going to actually mean a new school or a new funding source that will be directly available to you as a parent for that school year. And so that's what we track on our website.
Right. And sometimes people think school choice, that just means if you can go to a private school, but being a regular on School Choice Week, sorry, I mispronounced that before, schoolchoiceweek.com. And in that trends section, you guys are mentioning things like open enrollment expansions as well. And so that means the ability to cross public school boundaries and attend another public school without having to pay the nearby district, which is currently the policy where I live. I'd have to pay over $20,000 a year in order to send my children to a public school that is, I don't know, like a mile or so away from here. And open enrollment policies address that sort of thing. So that trend information that you all are succinctly summarizing is really helpful and covers an array of options. And parents are interested in an array of options right now. Like we're our eyes are open and we're not just settling on the residentially assigned public school. And you all have been digging into that phenomenon through an annual survey that comes out in January. Tell us a little bit about the results from this past January survey.
Yeah, so every January we ask parents, number one, how many of you have been looking for school choice options over the last year? And then also, what did you find? Which ones did you consider? Some of the interesting things from this year that I thought were really interesting. Number one, I hear all the time when I talk to journalists, they're like, well, we know a lot of people switched schools during the pandemic, but that was it. And the answer is no, it wasn't.
I'm not
Families
going
are,
back.
yeah, families, that was not a temporary thing that happened once. That is something parents are still actively doing. So this idea that everybody switched or maybe switched back one time and that was the end of the story in 2022 is not the case. People are continuing to look. People are continuing to make changes for their kids. And there are new families who have wanted to for the last few years who now have the access to do that thanks to the way that school choice is expanding in many states. And so that's the headline takeaway for me is that school choice is the new normal. That's what we titled the survey. It's not something that happened in the past or that is fading in intensity. It's only growing in intensity. So that's my headline takeaway from it. I think some other things that are interesting to know is that families are still really interested in choosing public schools. That may not be the one they're assigned to, but they are interested in generally having a public sector school choice option. That's just a financial reality, I think, for a lot of families. And it is increasingly going to be less of a, I should say, it'll be less of a factor going forward because in many states there are many more private school choice programs than there were, or more availability of those funds for families. So I'm interested to see how that stands on our study in a few years. But we do know that when families think about school choice, they are increasingly interested in a broad array of both public and private options. And one of the things that is most interesting to me in the survey, that was not one of the things we highlighted because we are not a politically oriented organization, but I think it's just instructive, is that Republicans say they support school choice more than Democrats, but families who report having actually exercised it skew Democrat, which I find fascinating.
I saw that yesterday when I was looking into the survey. We've been citing the survey in various op-eds at Independent Women's Forum, but I hadn't scrolled all the way to the bottom to see that particular finding. So say again what you just said.
So philosophically, Republicans are more likely to say that they support school choice, but in terms of actually exercising school choice, having chosen a non-assigned school for their child, Democrats, self-reported Democrat parents, are more likely to have actually lived school choice. And I find that fascinating.
That is information that I don't know that we hear very often. So thank you for sharing that and appreciate the source because you truly are not a partisan organization at all. You really are just there with the goal of serving parents. And that's very clear in everything that you all have been doing for almost 15 years. Okay, so parents are wanting options more than ever. They're researching options more than ever, and they're craving more information about
Mhm.
options. So you all are doing everything you can to provide information to parents, but we as a education reform, school choice advocacy arena should all be doing that, making sure that parents have all the information, particularly those tips. So before we ask our last question, I'd like for you to just kind of review again where parents can find things. You'd mentioned that kind of steps 1 through 7 can be found at schoolchoiceweek.com/tips. And then how do parents get to the state map? Is that pretty easy, the interactive state map?
Yes. So, and that's our top seller on the website, so to speak. So you will always be able to find that. It's at schoolchoiceweek.com. You'll find an interactive map, or you can click in the menu. It's a state guide, and you can click on your state, and that will give you the need to know information about every form of school choice in your state. You can drill down from there and do whatever you need to next.
And then the trends, how would people find out about the trends?
It's just /trends on our website. We try to keep the URLs easy so that when I say them on podcasts and other places, it's not too oppressive to make note.
Thank you for that, Shelby. You all do very intentionally and carefully think through these things, and I do appreciate that. Okay, final question on students over systems is always, what is the school choice myth that bothers you the most and that you'd like to dispel today?
So it has changed in the last year. It used to be that, private school choice is all that school choice is about. And I would have said every type of school choice matters, public, private, homeschooling, all that good stuff. Now I would say that the most exciting thing about school choice is the policies that just got passed. The thing that I think is most exciting about school choice is what we're going to do with all of those policies that
Mm.
just got passed. We have a generation of students in this country, millions of them, who are going to have access to more education options than they've ever had before. And it's a huge responsibility and so exciting to me to think about what we're going to do to make sure that those policies impact families the way that we all want them to. And so, in my mind, yes, we have absolutely expanded the boundaries of school choice across the country in such a fantastic way. And my hat is off to everyone who made that happen. But that's just the first part. We have so much work left to do to make sure that every family knows what those options are for them. And the way that we share that information and equip and support them in that process of finding a school is just as important as getting a checkbox next to that state's name on having a type of school choice.
Awesome. Shelby, thank you so much for all that Andrew and and you do at National School Choice Week and National School Choice Awareness Foundation. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of these resources for parents that you all have created.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great to talk to you.
We hope listeners found today's conversation informative and encouraging. If you enjoyed this episode of Students Over Systems, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to share this episode with your friends, especially your friends who are researching education options for their children. To learn more about the work of the IWF Education Freedom Center, please go to iwf.org/EFC. Thank you for listening to Students Over Systems. Until next time, please keep celebrating education freedom and brighter futures.